Make smart choices. Don't do drugs.
I'm gonna start the episode with that.
Yeah, it's good. Don't do them.
Welcome to the Rumikay Talks podcast, and today's guest, Andrew Kightlinger. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming. I've been excited to see your movie since I saw it first time in the American Cinematographer magazine. I was actually reading an article about it and your collaboration with the Fujifilm GFX Eterna 55, a large format cinema camera. And I was curious to see what the camera can do. And then I saw your that article, and I was excited to learn more about the person who decided to make this movie. So can you tell us a little bit about how this project was conceived, so to speak?
Yeah, no. I think it's pretty rare for a short film to end up in American Cinematographer. I don't know how common that is. So it was kind of a pinch me moment. I think a lot of filmmakers dream of that, and it's like, oh wow, we're in American Cinematographer. So I have about a stack of 10 of them, just kind of sitting there right now. Yeah, so that project came to me actually from the cinematographer of the project, Oren Sofer, who also happens to be my best friend here in Los Angeles. And he and I have been friends for a decade now, I think. I hate to say that, but that's true. Time flies. And we have very similar tastes, and we go see movies all the time. We're on each other's AMC A-list, and we often see double features together,
Nice.
And we've always wanted to work together. And we endeavored to do that in the last couple of years. And Oren, as you know, is kind of a cinematographer influencer as well. And camera companies are always going to him, asking him to go and work with their product. And so when Fujifilm was developing this new camera that was their biggest product launch in 30 years, they wanted Oren to be the first cinematographer to put his hands on it. And they needed a director. And so Oren came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to direct this thing?" And and I said, "Well, of course. Why would I say no?" And he was very honest and said, like, "I don't come up with stories, so you need to come up with something. Go do that." I'm like, "Okay, no easy task." So that's how the germ of this was born. He vouched for me and went to Fujifilm and said, "This is the guy to do this." And then I went and pitched to Fujifilm and said, "You have no idea who I am, but I'm fun to work with, and I will make you something really beautiful that will showcase your camera, but also be a piece of emotional filmmaking that will, stand the test of time." And that's how it all kind of came together.
Can you walk me through, for people who don't know, what does the pitching process look like? What do you begin? Who do you call? How do you even get yourself in the room?
I mean, it always helps to have, the cinematographer of the project, who in this case was Oren, vouching for you. It always helps to have a champion. Every person pitches differently. Everybody has their own way of doing things. Some people don't prepare. They just wing it, and they just go on pure instinct alone. I believe in preparation. I also believe in instinct. You have to have a little bit of that, But I believe in going in with a pitch deck, having imagery to show them, like, you have a vision. You're a director, so there's a vision. We're not gonna film on the GFX Eterna and and do just black and white and not show color. And then I also want to talk about my leadership style as a director, that I'm not going to yell at people and, throw Pepsi cans at PAs and things like that, and that I know how to bring together a crew, that I have a breadth of work, even though I haven't directed a giant blockbuster yet, so I can't, or giant commercials for Chanel yet. Don't have that under my belt yet. I did direct a movie for Sylvester Stallone, right? So I've directed a $7 million feature, so I have some experience, and I have a crew base I can pull from. And so I went in with, pitched my vision, and also pitched the ability to bring a team together and keep it under a certain budget, and said, I will steer the ship. So you go in with a certain level of confidence, but not too much confidence, and then I think a certain level of calm. And everybody does it differently, but for me, it's just like being a human being. And in the end, I think with, in film is a collaborative art. And I think what everybody's always looking for, because we all have to spend a lot of days together, sometimes months, sometimes years, it's like, can we tolerate that person for a long amount of time? And so oftentimes we don't know because you're working with somebody new. So in the pitching process, a lot of times producers or brand people are kind of operating on instinct themselves. Like, what's the feeling that they're getting from this person? And sometimes you roll the dice and they turn out to be nightmares. But I think on this process, like Fujifilm and I got along really well. And obviously they got along with Oren, and it was a wonderful marriage.
So in terms of the timeline, from the moment that you decided that, it would be interesting to make this movie, to you being on set, how long did it take?
Longer than you'd expect. This project was a beast. It was a beast. So what year is it? 2026. So I pitched the original concept for this in December of 2024. And actually this is, I don't know if we'll probably get into the content of the short maybe at some point. The story, will we? Okay. So we'll talk about that later. But I pitched the original concept of this in December 2024, and then we went through a period of. Most movies don't have to wait for the firmware of a camera to be ready, but on this one we had to do that. So we waited for about 4 to 5 months of just be like, the firmware is not ready, so we can't actually go into pre-production yet because. In Japan, the technicians were still working on the firmware of the technology of the camera. It just was not ready yet, and that's the whole point, right? We're trying to showcase this product, so we just had to wait. And like at some point, we're going to be ready. And we had a script, and I had storyboards, and I had a crew on deck, and I had a producer on board. But eventually, that firmware, we just kept pushing the deadline because the firmware, the technicians was just not ready. So eventually I lost a producer. I had to find a new one, which ended up working out and everything. But it was a little stressful and just kind of waiting, and hoping that I would still be able to direct it, that something else wouldn't come along, or something. It was about May of 2025. So it was a long time where we finally okay, we're finally going to make this movie. And then once we got going, we had about 3 weeks of solid prep for a 3-day shoot in Pacific City, Oregon. And then, because even though this is a short film, this also was a commercial, right? Yeah. So I had to deliver it to a marketing team in order for it to be unveiled, globally for a bunch of trade shows. I had 1 month to turn around editing, color, sound, visual effects, everything, including a trailer. So, and I was the editor too. So I went right from directing the film for 3 days to I had like 3 days off. I came back to LA, and then I was in this apartment, and I went right into editing the movie and editing this 17-minute short. And I had 22 days to put the movie together, and I was cutting, I think, for sometimes 15 to 16 hours a day to deliver this movie on schedule, to deliver it to color, to photochem, to deliver like to VFX, and to deliver it to sound design. And I had to get like a rough cut to sound in 2 weeks. And it was hard, even though the movie was like, we storyboarded and I had a concept of what I wanted. Once you go in there, you want to find something new in the edit. That's the whole point of editing, is you want to find a new movie in everything, right? Yeah. Otherwise if you're beholden to what you shot on set, then you're not really a filmmaker. You're just, I don't know what you are, but you're like working a marionette. So I wanted to go in there and dig in. So I almost killed myself. Like I have more gray because I just didn't sleep. Like I changed my sleep patterns. I used to go to bed at 10 and wake up at 5. And now I go to bed at 1 and wake up at 8 because of this movie. So it was a very arduous process, but very rewarding. So it was like making a feature film in a way. And then coming out of it, we delivered it on time and on schedule. And then it was sent to marketing. And then after that, it was basically a matter of, riding the wave and seeing where it went. But I'm very happy with what we did, and it's the one movie that I have really I made the movie I wanted to make.
Yeah, and that's what I found when I was reading about this movie, and then when I was watching trailer. I like the tone of it. I like where it puts me, what it makes me feel, just the environment of it. And I am a big fan of science fiction. And, when I saw like all those buttons and stuff, I was like, okay, let's see what's there for me. Yeah. And so I'm curious, what was the inspiration behind this story? How did you decide to choose this story for this project?
Well, I too am a huge fan of science fiction. I grew up on E.T. and I grew up on Aliens and all those things. And I, someday I think every director, their goal is to go make a big sci-fi film, at some point. And this I think Oren and I, he and I definitely knew that sci-fi was a good way to showcase the color spectrum in this camera. That was just a good genre. So I think we immediately said, oh, something sci-fi, whatever that is. And coming up with short stories is actually harder than coming up with features in a way, because you have to tell a story in a compressed amount of time. And oftentimes that's why short films are bad, because you don't really get an emotional catharsis from them. I've been to enough film festivals to know that. But in a weird way, fate intervened. And in the moment where I was really interviewing for this project, something kind of emotional happened. My grandmother died, and she was 96 years old, and she had lived a very long life, and she died in her sleep in the house that she lived in for over 50 years. So she died very peacefully, just like Rose in Titanic. And she went out on her own terms. So it was bittersweet, but it was nice. And so I wrote this script for this, the first draft of this script, which was about 12 pages long. I wrote it literally an hour after I saw my grandmother's body at the funeral home. It was the last time I saw her body, when she was kind of made up, after the embalming and everything. I saw her body, and that was very emotional. And we went home, and I just opened up my laptop, and I was inspired. And I wrote the story of a woman in a house by the ocean, looking for her husband in the cosmos. And I wrote it kind of the way you saw it, which was in kind of almost beat poetry format. So it was written like it was edited. That was on the page already, where some of the lines were single words, like coffee cup, spills, glass, shatters. Like it was very much written that way. So it came from this very real place. And grief has always been this very common theme for me as a filmmaker, because I also lost my mother when I was 21. And a lot of my features have dealt with that subject matter, and other shorts. So it's been this thing I've always thought about. And what I realized is after I wrote it, I'm like, oh, this is a short film that is meant to be sort of a window for other people to project their own grief journey. And so that's what I set out to make, was a movie where if you've lost somebody, or if you know somebody who's lost somebody, you can see the film and see your own journey reflected in it. It's not meant to really be a message film. It's just meant to be literally just raw emotion. And just sort of an emblem for loss and for healing in some way, where we go. And so that's kind of where it came from. And the sci-fi of it all, it can be religious if you want it to be. But it can also just be cosmic, right? It can be just cosmology. And where do we go? Like, who knows? Who knows where we go? And so that was kind of what I was playing with. There's just this very raw stuff, and what we cling to. And it's all just it's just from the soul. And that's why it was so easy to make for me. And it was just on set, I was just kind of very connected, because I felt like my grandmother there the whole time. And every day with the crew, I kind of said, because when you're a director, it's easy for you to become emotionally invested with the material because you wrote it, and it's your work in the end, right? So of course you care, right? But the crew, they're just getting paid, and a lot of them, they're just like, oh, great, another day. I gotta pound in nails into wood and build this set. They're like, great, when's beer o'clock? Overtime, boys. And I totally get that, and so. And trust me, sometimes I'm like beer o'clock, I'm kidding. But there's So, I always try to like remind people whether they think I'm genuine or not that's their own decision. But I always give a speech at the beginning of the day. Look, you've all lost somebody. Like, you can bring that to this if you want, but that's what we're here for. We're making a movie, making a piece of art. I'm making it for my grandmother. You make it for somebody you've lost. And you'll always have this experience. It's 3 days. Let's do something for the sake of art. And I think everybody, they see that I'm being genuine, and that's what we did. So that was my long-winded kind of reason of why we made the movie.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's amazing that you were able to do that in 3 days. Looks like a lot of work.
It was very hard. There was a fourth day of pickups. I should actually say that. Yeah, the eggs, the close-ups of eggs cracking and all that, all those inserts. That was day 4. It's like a half day of just no, it was a full day of just like and shots of like the horizon twisting. That was all very fun.
Okay,
because there were no actors.
Speaking of actors, did you try to cast someone who looks like your grandmother or reminded you of her, or
interesting?
You weren't even thinking about that?
No, I was not thinking about that, but ironically, she kind of does. Huh? You're the first person to ever ask me that, and she kind of does in a weird way. Actually, she kind of gives off the vibe a little bit. But no, I know that never crossed my mind. Actually, there's a moment in the short film, now that you've seen it, where she's, when you cut to like the shots of the cosmos of the James Webb, like we turned James Webb photography into like VFX. It's like the only kind of visual effects stuff, and there's shots of her entering a cave before, like the cave of solitude, the cave of grief. And then, that imagery is meant to be juxtaposing sort of the smallness of the human experience of grief, with just the vastness of the cosmos. And like that moment paired with the music, for me, that was when I was connected to my grandmother the most, because I was thinking of her little house in the middle of nowhere and in the Midwest. And then I would step outside into the prairie at night and see the Milky Way, because there was no light leak, where she lived in a town of 250 people. So there were no lights, and I would see everything. And so that moment would always take me back to being at her house at night. And so that's what I was trying to do, but also give this image of like how insignificant our grief is. But it is significant because it's ours, Take what you want from it. It's all meant to be visceral.
What was the reason of choosing the location by the ocean, or like on the shore?
It was shot in Pacific City, Oregon, and it wasn't originally set there. It was originally just set, ocean, exterior, seaside. Originally, that house was meant to be a lighthouse, but we couldn't find a lighthouse that was A, willing to let us shoot, B, cheap enough, B, made sense logistically, yada, yada, yada. And so we decided, okay, let's find a house. And then Oregon made sense. Yeah, I'd never been there. And our producer, Lila Yakub, suggested it because tax incentives. I had a tax incentive, and that made sense for a production. And so we went up there and scouted, and the gloominess of Oregon, of the Pacific Northwest, fit the theme of the film, grief, loss. It fit the theme of the film. And the reason I said it by the ocean is waves just represent thematically the grief and how it comes and goes. One day you're happy, 1 second you're happy, the other second something reminds you and makes you sad. So that imagery just was necessary for the film. And we spent hours filming waves, and of course I used like 2 seconds of it in the cut, but that's how it is. So that's why we shot there. But we did spend a lot of time looking at homes. We had a great location manager who went and like scouted a lot of homes all up the coast. And when you find a location, it just kind of feels right, and this one just felt right. And even like where we built the observatory that she's in, like it was never meant to be an A-frame. It was originally meant to be like a living room, a much bigger space.
Yes.
But we just loved this house, and the production designer and the DP and I went up into this A-frame that was literally just a children's bedroom, and kind of stood in there and kind of hunched over. And we're just like, this is going to be very inconvenient and hot to shoot in, but this is perfect. And,
It is.
yeah, no, it was great. And so we just like kind of ran with it,
Yeah, it's like literally a poster shot. That little space.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's travel back in time a little bit. I wanted to learn more about you when you were a kid, and particularly that moment when you decided to tell stories.
Okay. Well, I have a weird background. I think to many it could be weird, cool, whatever you want. I was born and raised in Madagascar. It sounds made up, but it's true.
That's amazing. In and of itself.
My parents were Lutheran missionaries, so they were medical missionaries. So they went to villages, and they would bring vaccines and help build wells and do medical clinics and whatnot. And I was just a little child, and I would say my earliest memory of like really being taken by movies, we'll say, was seeing E.T. Which is a classic. Everybody E.T. But it really was. That was the first memory of something where I just went, wow, whatever this feeling is, him on the bike with the moon, soaring through the trees with the John Williams score, or them being chased by the cop cars through the neighborhoods on the bikes, and his music's just chiming in, like all that stuff. I remember that feeling that it conjured in me as a kid, that sense of adventure and that euphoria. I remember thinking, whatever that is, I want to be a part of it. Having no idea what that entailed. Is that directing, acting? I don't know. At that time, I think it was the music. And I got obsessed with, my parents got me a little microphone and a little tape deck recorder. And then I would just record every single end credits of every movie we ever watched. So I created a little like mixtape of all the end credits of movies. So it was like, it's just like the end credits would roll, and then it would skip to a new song, just end credits. So it was like Gremlins 2, and then Goonies. It was just absurd. So I'm very obsessed with music. And in movies specifically, like scores are kind of an obsession of mine. And so that was kind of the thing that really, really lit my fuse as a kid, And one of those, and this is kind of a cool story actually, and very specific to Madagascar. My film education actually came. So the missionaries, obviously, it was Africa, and we didn't have much access to film, because it was the 80s. And also Madagascar is today, the 5th poorest country in the world. So, there's not much media, especially back then. So the way that missionaries would consume American media is that we would, whenever they went to the US, they'd bring back like VHS tapes with like recorded, off the TV, like movies. And then they put them in a footlocker, a red footlocker. It was red for some reason. And it was a metal one. And then the footlocker would stay with the family for like months at a time. And we would just burn through all the movies and watch them. And then the footlocker then would go in the back of a car and then travel across the island to a different family. And because the roads were terrible, that journey could take 7 days. Even though it was only like 200 miles, it could take 7 days because the roads are so bad. And then it would stay with that family. And that footlocker was called the Red Island Video Club, because Madagascar is famous for its red, iron-rich earth. So those VHS tapes, which included Gremlins, Rocky, E.T., Arachnophobia, the list goes on of the amount of movies were on there. Some things I shouldn't have been allowed to watch, like Child's Play. Those are kind of my film education. And so those were the obsession grew. So there's a lot more to that. I became obsessed with Jim Carrey, wanted to be an actor for a while. I think a lot of 90s kids, wanted that. And so I became really into acting, comedy, improv, and that fed into theater. And then I went to college, and in college I continued with sort of acting, theater, directing. I studied politics. That was my major. So I did politics as I guess that was my main thing. Yeah, but then I don't know, but I couldn't quit the film bug. And I went to film school anyway as my grad degree, and oddly enough, I use my politics degree more in directing than I do film in a weird way, because directing's such a diplomatic position.
Yeah.
So I feel like everything I learned in like international affairs and political science, I use on set all the time. You know, it's kind of funny that way. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did, yeah, pretty much. And that's that little film education. I love it. The red box, that's amazing. And I wonder. Well, it kind of leads to my next question: which movie have you watched more than 3 times, or even?
So many.
Okay, maybe more than 10 times.
Yeah, but I'll tell you. No, I have an answer for you. In fact, I'm looking at the poster right now. I have a framed poster of the movie Walkabout. Which is a 1971 movie by Nicholas Roeg. That would be my second favorite film of all time. My first favorite film was actually One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Cuckoo's Nest is a movie that, to me, I saw it probably too young. I think I was 10 years old when I saw it. My parents showed it to me, so they're to blame. But it was one of those movies where I saw it and I went, a movie can be both funny and devastating at the same time. It can be well directed, that's acting, number one. Number two, that's directing, just command of framing, of performance. And also just story that transcends and has something mythic to say about the human condition. Somehow at 10 years old, I was like, okay, that's what a great film is. And to this day, that is still a great film. And so that is a movie that I've seen 10,000 times. You know, Alien, RoboCop, those types. To Live and Die in L.A. Like I have Ron right behind me. I see that. I have a Jaws.
Yeah.
But
I was looking at Kurosawa.
Yeah. I have eclectic, weird taste. I have no I like pretentious movies that go to Cannes. Mm-hmm. And then I also love, dirty work with Norm Macdonald. It really just depends.
Yeah, I feel that for real. So, I grew up on Jackie Chan movies, and then I watched Tarkovsky several times too. So it's the different things.
Operation Condor. It's my favorite.
Yeah. So you mentioned your Madagascar education, the politics. What do you think? What are some of the best directing lessons that you have learned so far that you use now and that you'll use for the next projects?
What a great question. Wow. Number one, I'm still learning every single time I do something. Every day I'm still learning. Every movie I make, hopefully I'll keep learning until hopefully I'm smart enough to retire at some point, and I still haven't made, I'm still growing in my career, and I have a lot of movies I want to make. And I hope I keep learning. But, I think that a big one is I think that there's a fallacy that you have to be a dictator on set, and that directors have to be authoritarians. And that's just not true. You can be nice and benevolent, and be a smart collaborator, and still be a quote unquote visionary, and stick to your guns, and make the movie you want to make. And those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can be assertive and be kind. You just have to have your head on straight. If you can't do that, go to therapy. I don't know, figure it out. And I'll be honest, like that, on my last feature, I saw some deficiencies in my work. I'm very proud of that movie. But I saw some deficiencies. I was like, how can I be better be better at this thing. So then I went to a performance coach and I learned how to be better at them. And I already see now, and on this Fujifilm project, I put those improvements into action and I saw results. So I can only encourage, you're probably asking, what were they?
I'm curious, a performance coach is someone who teaches you how to work with actors for a scene, or?
No, I'm sorry, yeah, more of a therapist, like a performance coach, like a, motivational, like.
Yeah, got it.
Understanding like why you act the way you act as a human being. Performance, not as an actor. But in that one, like I can be a people pleaser as a human being, right? And as a director, that can be a tricky thing because you want everybody to like you, but you can't be that as a director. So you have to toe this like very tricky line. So I went to a therapist / performance coach and we did some deep work and I learned something about myself and put that into action. And not only in my work life, but also in my personal life, my relationships, my both romantic relationships, my friend relationships, everything, even like when I go to the store, And by doing that actively, I changed my personality in a positive way. And I was able to be more assertive on set for the Fujifilm project and realize, if I say I want something a certain way, that person's not going to be, mad about it. I'm being very honest right now, but I think people need to hear that. Like you can be, because I think a lot of directors don't want to be vulnerable because they think they have to be, but that's actually not true. And vulnerability is the other thing I wanted to talk about, is that, and this is almost like giving away a secret, but with actors, a big part of directing is actors. A lot of directors think it's all just about the image, but that's not true. You can come and you can have storyboards and you can say, okay, great, and go off and do your thing. But movies mean nothing if the performance in front of if the performances in those images aren't truthful or boring or mean nothing. And I think like to get good performances or to get actors who feel alive or who feel taken care of, you, the director, have to be vulnerable yourself with them. And so what I do, because I come from an acting background, I'm able to be vulnerable with them. And that can be as simple as just opening up about a story about my life, or doing something as silly as like making a fart sound. I worked with kids on my last movie, on my last feature. The lead role was a 10-year-old kid, right? And I'd never done that before. That was a big challenge for me. It was super fun. And he was a great actor. But he and I had to like become a child every day when I came to set to work with him. And, and to make him feel like comfortable to like really emote, like I had to make myself vulnerable in front of everybody. And that meant like, making fart sounds and being goofy and kind of just like getting down onto his level. And then the adults would see that and be like, okay, like this guy's an idiot. I can do whatever too. And I think that there's something to that. And so my encouragement, and I learned that was a lesson I learned really early on in film school. So my biggest like advice there is to any like film student who's like, or anybody listening, honestly, is go take an acting class. If you're a director or a writer, but a director especially, go take an acting class. You may be the worst actor in the world, doesn't matter. Go learn to be a little more vulnerable because that'll help you on set. It'll help you communicate better with everybody, your crew too.
That's a good one. That's definitely, and especially those little prep that you do, like with this, how to make other feel in a certain way by making yourself feeling a certain way, and using those little things to make it happen. That's a pretty good one.
There's a lot of other things I could talk about, but we have limited time. So you mentioned prep. That's another one, but we won't. Prep is everything.
Feature films versus TV shows. Which one do you think is better as a job, as director, let's say, and what do you think is the future of both?
Oh God, I haven't had the luxury of directing a TV show yet. I would love to at some point. They do scare me in a way because somebody else is in control on TV. It's a showrunner, and me as a director, I like to be in control. In control. So you show up and it's you're a little less free because there's somebody else, or maybe it's more free because you don't have to be in control. So maybe it would be nice because the showrunner is the one who's kind of control the vision. So you just have to work with the actors. That actually would be kind of fun. But there is part of me that maybe I just talk myself into it. It might be kind of fun. So it really depends on what you want. I think some people don't want the pressure of having to do everything and having to conceive and think of everything. And that's what a feature film director has to do. You are tossed 200 questions a day, and you have to have an answer for all of them. I like that. That's fun because you have to either the answer, or you have to come up with them on the spot. And I'm sure on TV you do too, but I haven't had the luxury of doing that yet. But I think that's more of the showrunner's job from what I've heard from people. And, what's the future of them? I think we've seen in the last 10 years, 15 years that they've kind of been bleeding together, right? You see more feature film style filmmaking bleeding into TV, and then I've seen a lot of TV style filmmaking bleeding into features, for better or worse. And you see something like Pluribus, and that feels like I'm watching, feature film. And I'm like, oh, I'd like to direct an episode of that. That'd be fun,
Yeah.
So that type of TV is very alluring to me. I don't know how to answer that question because I think they're coexisting wonderfully right now. And as long as there are, very rich tech-driven streamers, tech-funded streamers that are willing to take chances on shows, we might be at a good place. But I'm a very movie theater. I believe that movies should be seen in the cinemas. I believe that cinemas are a gift from the cosmos, and I see at least, I try to see 2 to 3 movies in the cinema per week. And I have a TV, but I don't watch as much as you think on that. I go to the movie theater. I make movies for the cinema. My next feature, 2 features, I am almost designing, on purpose to be seen in the theater so that there's no way they can be shown on streaming first. So the producers and the distributors be like, oh, okay, we have to release this theatrically. And that means I better do a good job when I make them. And so no matter what, I think they're going to coexist because there's going to be people that want to go to the theaters and go out and see movies in that format. And there are always going to be people that don't want to leave and just sit at home. And they're always going to coexist. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. I always try to keep checking my pulse on this issue because feature films, TV shows, a lot of people watching them on TV, on iPads, on iPhones, and then I'm curious who's still watching them in theaters. And there is a little bit of things happening the other way. So Stranger Things was screened at the theater the last episode. Yeah. So that's another thing that's also happening. So it's always, I'm always curious to see how those 2 things are moving together.
And I went to that. Oren and I, the DP of the Fujifilm project, we went to that screening. And it was fun to be in a sold-out screening watching the finale of Stranger Things with a screaming audience yelling and screaming at the entire thing. And we're like, wait a second, this is counterintuitive. Yeah. Netflix, what are you doing?
So let me challenge your creativity a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So if you were an extraterrestrial from a perfect world where everything is in harmony, and now you come to our world with all of its issues, what would be the one thing that you'd fix?
I'm going to pull from, I just saw the movie Surat for the second time. Nominated for an Oscar, and
yes.
Brilliant movie. And that movie, I was just discussing with Oren again that to me the movie is like a parable about immigration, and it kind of takes place in this post-apocalyptic world. And it's not really about race, but I'm mixed race. I come from, I had an Indian mother, and I grew up in Madagascar, and my identity is kind of like global in a way. And if aliens came from this utopian planet and they came here and they saw how we acted, I would want them to sort of give us the gift where somehow, even though we all looked quote unquote different, we would just all see each other as the same. We get to keep what makes us different, but there's no judgment. There it is. They take away judgment. We live in a judgment-free society. We can still judge crimes. See, this opens up a can of worms.
Yeah.
But there's no judgment. This is a terrible answer. I don't like this answer. No. I'm going to stick with it because it's complex in a way. But it's you can't, because we have prejudices, right? Oh, maybe that's the answer. They come and they get rid of our prejudice. That's the, it's such a trite answer. I don't like.
You don't have to solve the world in one conversation.
I know. It's okay. Maybe it's just ice cream. maybe we just all eat salt and straw and we never get fat. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. A world without judgment. Yeah.
Coming soon.
Anyway.
Theater near you. So, this is one of the final questions. I mean, second to last question that I usually ask, and this is obsession of the week, something fun. It can be anything that you've been obsessed with this week or past week. A book, a movie, a brand of toilet paper, anything really.
Still looking for the perfect brand of toilet paper, I'll tell you that. I've been reading a book because I'm all about self-improvement. It's a big thing for me. I'm reading a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Have you read this book?
Yes.
You have, yeah. Great book. Everybody should read it, especially directors or anybody who's in this industry, because we tend to get distracted as creatives. We're all over the place. But it's a great book that is about self-improvement and about getting rid of, just kind of taking the best step forward, and not thinking too much about the big picture, but just taking these little baby steps in your life that can be cumulatively positive over time. And I think it's really wonderful. And it's an easy read, and it's fun to read, and it's on Amazon. Buy it. It's good.
Yeah, I read the whole book. Not this book. I read another book using the technique, but little by little, like 5 minutes away on my drive to work. I was reading the book and eventually I finished it.
See, you put it in practice by reading the book. It's perfect.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's definitely a good one. So, Andrew, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Anything that I miss? Anything you'd like to put some light on?
Make smart choices. Don't do drugs.
I'm gonna start the episode with that.
Yeah, it's good. Don't do them. It's silly. Spielberg didn't do drugs. Seriously, use that as all the best ones didn't do drugs. So I always use that as I'm like, they didn't do it, so I don't need to either.
So if anyone wants to connect with you online, what would be the best way to do that?
Andrew.vhs on Instagram. I don't have Twitter, and I'm not really on Facebook, so that is the one place.
Well, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much for having me. This was a blast. Love your questions.
Thank you so much.